Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. For today's case, we have a case with mafia connections. This is a case from the First Circuit Court of Appeals out of Massachusetts, United States of America versus Richard Valentini. In this case, there was extortion and mafia activity, and the mafia was convicted of participating in their activities. And Valentini, at least, is arguing his conviction was improper because he didn't do nothing bad. So we're going to review a little bit about the facts of the case and try to determine whether Mr. Valentini is a mafioso or he's just an innocent bystander. Let's get started. A jury convicted Richard Valentini in 2017 of one count of conspiracy to commit Hobbs Act extortion and one count of aiding and abetting the same. Hobbs Act extortion is just extortion that occurs in interstate commerce. So extortion is normally a state crime. When it's federal extortion, it's called Hobbs Act extortion. So that makes it federal law. That's the only difference, really. Let's read on. The defendant and his cohorts, ostensibly members of an organized crime organization in Springfield, Massachusetts, tried to extort money from Craig Morel, the owner of an interstate towing company, through means such as threatening Morel with death, striking Morel in the face, and telling Morel his access to towing contracts for his business with state and municipal governments depended on him making the extortion payments. It sounds pretty extortionate, yeah. When you're threatening people with death and beating them up and threatening their livelihood unless you pay up. So that sounds kind of extortionate, yeah. The defendant primarily challenges the sufficiency of the evidence. The evidence was more than sufficient to support the verdict on both crimes. We also reject two legal arguments he makes, which misinterpret the Hobbs Act. We stress again that obtaining the property element of the act does not require the government to prove the defendant personally benefited or took possession of the property. We affirm. Yeah, quite right. When you're looking at obtaining the property, we're looking at really whether you obtained the property. We don't look at whether or not it benefited you in any way. We're not necessarily even looking to whether or not you possessed the property at any point, because you can be obtaining as part of a conspiracy or an accessory to it. So if you're furthering the conspiracy and people are obtaining property, even though it's not you, even though it's not benefiting you, yeah, you've obtained the property because you're part of the conspiracy. You know, what's good for one is good for all in a conspiracy. Another good reason not to join conspiracies because you get implicated and held responsible for everyone's crimes. So don't do that. Don't join conspiracies. And don't commit crimes for that matter. Karash, it could have been RICO, but the government didn't charge RICO in this particular case. So no RICO here, but this sounds like it could have been RICO. It sounds like predicate for RICO. So yeah, this could have been RICO, I'm sure. Morel owns and operates CJ's Towing, a vehicle towing and storage company in Massachusetts. CJ's Towing has had state and municipal contracts, for example, for the Turnpike and State Police, and contracts with private auto clubs such as Allstate Roadside. CJ's Towing also tows and services vehicles out of state and transports individuals whose vehicles have broken down around Springfield across state lines to Connecticut, New York, New Hampshire, and Vermont. In September 2000, in the year 2000, CJ's Towing purchased another towing company and assumed its contracts with the MSP and Springfield Police. After that purchase, the local organized crime figure, Frank DePlurglora, told Morel he'd have to pay the mob to provide kickbacks to city officials to ensure Morel and his company retained those contracts. Morel complied and paid. Nearly a year later, Morel learned the kickbacks went to Al Bruno, the leader of a New York-based Genovosa crime family crew in Springfield. So the New York Mafia has expanded to Springfield. Okay. Maybe that's Fat Tony's connection is to the New York connection, because he's from Springfield too, right? Anyways, fearing reprisal if he stopped, Morel continued paying the kickbacks. In October 2003, Morel stopped making those payments after CJ Towing lost its Springfield towing contract, as it was apparent that Duplicova and Bruno could not deliver on their promises to see the contract continued. So, you know, he's saying breach of contract, right? You guys promised me I could keep my services if I paid you, but I lost my contract. So breach of contract, right? You've failed to deliver on your side of the contract. Therefore, I'm failing to deliver on my side of the contract. So there's nothing funny about this, right? It's just a routine breach of contract claim, right? No, it's extortion. So let's read on. Genovese. Okay, fair enough. Genovese. Thank you for the correction. Attempts to collect the unpaid kickbacks from Morel ceased when Bruno was murdered a month later and law enforcement arrested Anthony Adarilla, one of Bruno's associates. You think I'm going to get janked for mispronouncing their name? Really? I hope not. Sorry I mispronounced your name, Genovese crime family and all, but, sorry about that. I'm not familiar with your name and how it's pronounced. As anyone can testify from having watched this channel, I mispronounce names on a somewhat regular basis, so yeah, sorry about that. Almost a decade later, in August or September of 2013, Morel was told that a new crew, headed by Ralph Santilio and comprised of at least Albert Calvinci, Valentini, and John Bastille, would soon begin demanding extortion payments from him. If any of those names were mispronounced, I apologize. I'm doing my best. I'm not from New York. They also threatened Morel's life if he failed to cooperate, or if he contacted law enforcement, and Santilino struck Morel in the face. Santilio initially demanded $50,000 in arrears, that would be back payments, so that's a fancy word for money you owe us from the past, and $4,000 per month in ongoing payments, but after some resistance by Morel, reduced his demand to $20,000 in arrears and $2,000 per month. Morel then sought help from his best friend, a police officer, who referred him to another police officer. In October 2013, the MSP fitted Morel with a hidden recording device, a bug, and gave Morel $5,000 to give as extortion payment to the new crew and to see how they'd react to the insufficient payment. Later that day, Calabrese brought Valentini with him to collect the money from Morel at Morel's house. Valentini is a big, strong man, bigger than Morel, and after Morel expressed concern about being extorted, Valentini told him to relax. Valentini then guaranteed in return for continued payments, Morel would be all set with the City of Springfield contract and would win a Massachusetts Turnpike contract. Well, given the past failure to perform on contracts, not so sure I'm feeling reassured by this new promise to perform, so yeah. Kotaku says it's a dangerous game. I tend to agree. This isn't necessarily the way I'd want to run this sting, because I would imagine it could go very, very wrong. But this is what they decided on, so let's carry on. When Morel stated that he would pay, Valentini stated Morel was going to get treated just as good as Al Bruno treated him. Valentini then stated that Morel was never going to have problems with anybody. Calabrese asked Morel to tell them if he had any issues with anybody, and Valentini said, "It's going to end. I guarantee you it will end." Given what little I know about the mafia, I can guarantee it won't end. At Calabrese's demand, Morel then gave them $5,000. Morel stated he could only pay the rest piecemeal over the next few weeks. Calabrese responded that paying over the next week or few weeks was acceptable, but the first payment would need to total $20,000, and then Morel would need to pay $2,000 every month. So now, the victim and the mafia are negotiating on a payment scheme. Okay. During this exchange about payments, Valentini was nodding and kind of participating in the conversation. Morel complained how steep the payments were and said he needed more time to pay the arrear sum. Valentini said this was acceptable, so long as Morel didn't take too long, stating, "Yeah, I mean, not a marathon, but you can do, I'm not 100% sure I know, but we're now negotiating with the mafia on payment terms. So, okay. There were multiple additional meetings in October and November of 2013, during which the crew demanded that Morel pay the remaining $15,000 of the agreed-upon arrears amount. At an October 9th meeting, at the request of the police, Morel gave Calabrese only $500 instead of the $5,000 he had promised. Wow, this police are really kind of playing this in a very sort of weird way. So first of all, he only showed up with $5,000. And the second time around, he had said, "I'll pay you $5,000, but he only showed up with $500. Again, I'm not sure the police are really handling this the best possible way. And with the mafia, I would just humbly suggest the police should probably get the FBI involved just as a consultant. At a bare minimum, because this does not strike me as the best possible strategy. Hey, show $5,000 even though they asked for 50. And this time, hey, even though you promised 5,000, why don't you just show up with 500? I'm sure it'll end well. And I'm not really feeling this is the best police strategy, in my humble opinion. Later that day, Calabrese and Santillo visit Morel and angrily threaten him with implied death and other violence. Santillo then aggressively opened Morel's shirt, looking for and failing to find the recording device. Well, I'm glad that they didn't just tape it to his shirt, tape it to his chest. So I don't know what kind of recording device they were using, but apparently they at least thought that far ahead. Thank God. Both Calabrese and Santillo threatened to get rid of Morel's towing contract if Morel did not pay the remaining portion of $15,000 by the next Friday. A similar incident in which Morel intentionally did not pay as much as promised, and Santillo threatened Morel at a coffee shop in East Longmeadow occurred on October the 15th. So now a third time he's coming with less than demanded. And so this mafia is patient mafia. I do not know that I would recommend this strategy personally. And if anyone out there is being threatened by the mafia, I think your first call really should be to the FBI, not to the local police. Just a tip. So, call the FBI first. Call your local field office of the FBI. You can look up the local field office for you and call their main number. And when you get the secretary, they'll say FBI and then you say, yes, I'd like to report that I'm being extorted by the mafia, and they will transfer you to someone who will help you further. So do that would be my recommendation. At a meeting on October the 22nd, 2013, at the coffee shop, Morel once more told Calabrese he would not pay the money. Always good. This resulted in an October 23rd, the next day, encounter in the same coffee shop among Morel, Depregola, Santillo, and Calabrese. Again, apologize if I'm getting any of your names wrong. No disrespect. I'm doing my best. In which the crew tried to get Morel to say that he had never struck or threatened him. On November the 8th of that year, Morel met Depregola at the police's request, and Depregola stated that Morel's ordeal would end if he paid the remainder of the $20,000 arrear sum. Morel left that meeting, and minutes later, the troopers observed that Valentini arrived, briefly spoke with him, and left. Finally, bringing an end to this, the FBI arrested Valentini, Santarilla, Depregola, and Calabrese on October the 4th, 2016. I don't know how good I feel about that, because all this stuff with the MSP occurred in 2013. So they're a little vague in the opinion about what happened between 2013 and 2016, because in the immediate paragraph just before this, they talked about November the 25th, 2013, and then skip immediately to August the 4th, 2016. So they're a little vague about what happened in that 3-year interim. So I don't know who called the FBI and got them involved, but they just skipped to, and 3 years later, the FBI arrested them. So the MSP, in their infinite wisdom, had this guy antagonize the mafia 3 different times in 2013, but they weren't arrested to 2016. It's a miracle this guy is alive. For 3 years, the mafia didn't kill this guy. It's amazing. The MSP is also amazing for being stupid. But the FBI finally got involved and arrested these people in 2016, 3 years after the please put your life on the line incidents. So there's some good at that, I guess. A federal grand jury indicted Valentini, Santillo, Depregola, and Calabrese for conspiracy to interfere with commerce by threats or violence in violation of law, and interference with commerce by threats or violence and aiding and abetting the same in violation of law. Valentini went to trial. The other defense entered plea agreements with the government and pled guilty. I can only imagine the reason they're not being charged with other crimes is because the MSP hosed the case so bad in the way they're handling it when they handled it. That's what I'm thinking. I can think of other charges off the top of my head that would come, like conspiracy, like extortion, like all kinds of stuff, right? It's I can think of other crimes that would apply, but I'm imagining there's not more here because the local police screwed up their end of the case so bad. This is all the FBI had at the end of the day. This is all they could prove. So, way to go, MSP. Great job. At the close of the government's case in chief, Valentini moved for judgment on acquittal, but asked the district court to defer ruling on the motion, which is fine. The jury convicted Valentini of both counts. At a post-trial hearing, Valentini raised that pending motion for judgment of acquittal and specifically argued that he had not participated in the conspiracy because he had attended only one meeting with Morel and the crime did not affect interstate commerce because the money obtained belonged to law enforcement, not Morel. No, absolutely not. Let me give everyone here a very, very quick primer on conspiracy law. All right. If you're part of a conspiracy, you're liable for everything in the conspiracy as a general proposition. There are exceptions to that rule where things become so attenuated from the conspiracy, you're not necessarily liable. But as a general rule, if you're part of a conspiracy, you're guilty for everything everyone does as part of that conspiracy, as part of the common agreement of the conspiracy, right? So if you attend one meeting and you participate in one meeting as part of the criminal conspiracy, guess what? You have participated in all the meetings and all the things of the conspiracy. Yeah, you get 1 foot in and you're done. So standard conspiracy law is, yeah, I only did this one really small thing. Is that one really small thing illegal? Yeah. Is that one really small thing in furtherance of the conspiracy? Yeah. Were you part of the agreement of the conspiracy? Yeah. Well, bingo. You're guilty of everything. Don't commit conspiracies. Don't commit crimes. You're going to be liable for way more than you bargained for, but that's conspiracy law. And, I can't feel that bad because, yeah, you're participating as a criminal. And so, I only did this one little thing. Well, oh, too bad. The district court denied the motion, sentenced him to a 20-month of imprisonment. This appeal followed. Again, I can only assume that it's such a low penalty because the MSP screwed the case. 20 months seems a little insufficient to me, given what we know from the cases, but this is the best the government can do. I'm also amazed that these guys aren't like predicate felons and they don't get additional time for that. So this is strange, but yeah. I wonder if Morel's now in witness protection somewhere. Wherever you are, Morel, hope things are going well these days. Valentini's first argument on appeal is the evidence presented to the jury was insufficient to demonstrate his voluntary participation in the conspiracy. Really? How so? He contends the words he spoke in the October 4th meeting were gibberish, and so do not prove that he was a member of the conspiracy to extort Morel. Sure, you just happened to be there. At the same time, you're an innocent bystander in this meeting where they're openly threatening this guy. Sure, okay, that totally makes sense. He claims that neither his mere presence at the meeting nor the fact that he drove Calabrese to the meeting is sufficient evidence for a rational jury to convict him of a conspiracy charge beyond reasonable doubt. I don't know, man. It feels pretty good to me. If the state can prove that you drove one of your fellow co-conspirators to the meeting and can prove you were present at the meeting, I'm not feeling like this is beyond reasonable doubt. Now, I can see why a jury would go the other way, but I can totally see why a jury would say, yeah, we're convinced beyond a reasonable doubt he was part of the conspiracy. That seems like enough to get beyond reasonable doubt to me. Not having major problems with this. So let's press on. A jury easily could have found it beyond reasonable doubt that Valentini conspired to extort Morel. Valentini's argument on appeal is that he only spoke meaningless gibberish at the meeting. Not so. Valentini tried to calm Morel so that he'd cooperate with the scheme, said the benefits of paying for the arrears would equal those Morel had received from Bruno, stated that in exchange for the payments, he and the rest of the crew would end any problems Morel experienced, assured Morel that he and the crew would not seek payments that would prevent CJ Towing from operating, and actively participated in the discussion about the next meeting at which, according to Calabrese, either Calabrese or Valentini would collect the next payment. This seems like enough for a jury to conclude that he was part of the conspiracy. Yeah, I'm not really seeing massive problems. If the government is able to prove all these things, that beyond a reasonable doubt is part of the conspiracy, not seeing massive problems personally, yeah. From these facts, a jury could reasonably infer that Valentini understood and knew of the original extortion agreement between Morel and Bruno's crew, what had happened between Morel and Salentino 4 days earlier, and what could happen between the Springfield crew and Morel in the future if Morel did not comply with the crew's payment demands. A jury could conclude that Valentini was promising that he and the rest of the crew would treat Morel just as well as Bruno had treated him in exchange for extortion payments. They provide Morel's protection and resolve the problems. I'm not seeing massive problems with the jury verdict here. It seems like there's quite a lot of evidence that they brought to bear, and seems okay to me, so I'm good. This evidence permitted a rational jury to infer that Valentini was a member of the crew that was extorting Morel and that he intended to participate in the extortion. We conclude that the evidence was sufficient to prove Valentini not only drove Calabrese and was present at the meeting, but also voluntarily participated in the conspiracy to extort. Yeah, I'm with the Court of Appeals. I don't know the full factual record, but on appeal, you interpret things in light of the favor of the party that won below. That's how you do things in appeal. So here, the jury has already rendered a verdict. They've already rendered guilty. So on appeal, in this situation, you interpret everything in the light most favorable to the government, or the light most favorable to the jury. Some courts would phrase it that way, because that is now the decision below. Every time a court is hearing things, they tend to interpret things in light of the status quo. So the trial court interprets things in light of the status quo, which is that he's not guilty. So everything is interpreted and filtered through that light. But on appeal, he's already been convicted. So now we interpret everything in light of the favor of the verdict. We assume the jury came to the right conclusion. You have to prove they didn't. And so were there other facts that might have gone the other way on this? Probably, but we don't really care. We only care, were there enough facts, even in isolation, to have the jury reach this conclusion. So even if there were like 10 other things that the jury heard that would contradict this, we can reasonably say the jury has the right to consider the evidence in any weight it wants. So the jury can disregard any evidence it wants. So even if there were 9 other things presented that would counter this, the jury could have said, well, those 9 other things are not as much weight, or we just don't care altogether, and we have this one thing, and this one thing shows all this. And the Court of Appeals says, yeah, that's right. That's what a jury gets to do. A jury gets to wait and consider the evidence. So if they heard this one thing and they heard 9 other things and they said, yeah, we relied on this and not the other stuff, that's what juries do. They weigh evidence. And as long as there's enough to convict, we're done. So yeah, there's enough to convict, we're done. No problem. Valentini argues next that the word obtaining in the Hobbs Act phrasing of obtaining the property requires the defendant to take personal possession of the property. No. He then asserts there's no evidence he directed property to another or received personal benefit. We don't care. A rational jury could have found that Valentini conspired in, aided and abetted, a scheme that brought about the transfer of property, that is, the arrears payment, from Morel to third parties, that would be members of the crew. And so, the government satisfied its burden with respect to this element. Yep. Once again, basic principle of conspiracy law. Exceptions apply. Basic principles of conspiracy law. You are part of a conspiracy. You assist the conspiracy. You aid and abet the conspiracy. You're liable for everything the conspiracy does. So, sure, you didn't personally obtain the property. Do we care? No, we don't. Because someone else in your conspiracy obtained it, and you helped with it, and so therefore you're also guilty of obtaining it. But I never saw it. It didn't benefit me. Look at my field. Look at how many cares I care. It is barren. I do not care at all, says the court, and I'm 100% with them. Yeah, if you join a conspiracy, you're on the hook for everything in that conspiracy. Asterisk, some exclusions apply. See store for details. So that is the end of the case of United States versus Richard Valentini. In this case, we learned that the mafia was threatening a tow truck driver, and that they were trying to keep him responsible for back payments on a contract that they incidentally had faltered on because he lost his contracts with the city. They had promised him if he paid them, he'd get his contracts. And then he kept paying them and he didn't get his contracts. So They were in default of contract. They were in no position to speak. But they are coming back for back payments and say, yeah, we want our payment. Now, basic principles of contract law, I don't think they're entitled to any payments. They're in total breach of their side of the contract. Not that the contract was valid anyway, because it was extorted, but if we pretend it was valid for the moment, they're not entitled to it because they, they extorted, but they didn't fulfill their contract, and now they have the gall to come back and say we want payment for services we didn't render. I mean, come on, who are these people? So after the MSP very foolishly told this guy at least 3 times to openly defy the mafia, somehow he continued living for another 3 years, and then the FBI got involved, and then they got arrested and charged and convicted. And Valentini says you didn't have enough evidence, and I say, and the Court of Appeals says, yeah, they absolutely did have enough evidence. What are you talking about? You're part of a conspiracy. Don't join conspiracies. This is what happens. Play stupid games, win super prizes. That's the end of this case. Thank you for joining me as we both read this case together and now better understand the law. If you're enjoying this legal education content, please subscribe to this channel. It really helps us grow. And check out one of our other videos, including the one that's currently being displayed on the thumbnail on screen. Thank you so much for your continued support. And until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.